So,
Yes.
okay. Good evening and welcome to the Monday, July 7th, 2025 meeting of the Arlington County Planning Commission. I'm Commissioner Tenley Peterson, Chair. Tonight, the Commission will discuss and vote on the following items: an ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County zoning ordinance pertaining to signage, and Columbia Pike form-based code items pertaining to the zoning ordinance phased development use permit and the use permit for the development of Barcroft Apartments and ground retail. Please review the online agendas for items that will be discussed later this week at the Wednesday, July 9th and Thursday, July 10th recess meetings. Presenters and speakers joining the meeting through Microsoft Teams, please keep your phones and other electronic devices muted until you are called upon by the clerk. Please turn off the sound to any devices around you to minimize interference and keep your cameras off until the clerk announces your name to speak. When called upon, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is in the meeting command bar at the top of your screen. The moderator nor the clerk has the ability to unmute your mic. Once you have spoken, please mute your mics and turn off your camera. If you are dialing in by phone to join the meeting, press *6 to unmute. Public speakers will be called upon by the clerk at an assigned time. Pre-registration with email confirmation is required to speak at tonight's hearing. We are not able to accommodate additional speakers. All speakers, virtual and hybrid, will receive 2 minutes to comment as an individual. Only representatives of a county board appointed advisory group, committee, and/or commission will receive 3 minutes to comment. A timer will be displayed on the screen if speaking virtually, and speakers in person will follow the timer stationed at the podium. Audio of tonight's meeting is available via phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity, please reconnect by phone. However, if you are dialing in by phone and unable to see your screen, we will provide an audible 30-second warning to wrap up your comments. You will be muted when your time has expired. The meeting chat is active for presenters or commissioners who need technical assistance only. Please do not use the meeting chat for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for further information. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. Tonight's meeting will be available for review through the YouTube platform. A link has been provided on the Planning Commission website 24 to 48 hours after the adjournment of the meeting. Although the meeting will no longer be a live broadcast, the meeting will be available for review with closed captioning on Comcast Xfinity channels 25 and 1085, Verizon Fios channels 39 and 40, 24 to 48 hours after the adjournment of the meeting. Lastly, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website via a link to YouTube as stated. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act requirements. Madam Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first item is ZOA-2025-02, ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County Zoning Ordinance, Section 13, signs to increase size, number, and placement locations, and remove limitations on building height regulations for signs placed above a height of 40 feet, and etc. We have Jill Hunger and Debbie Allen Debbie Albers to present this item this evening.
Great. As our clerk just mentioned, my name is Jill Hunger. I'm joined here with Debbie Albert to present to you about strategic amendments to Arlington sign regulations. So I wanted to provide a quick summary of the proposed amendments, and these changes would include greater flexibility for the size, number, and placement of signs placed above a height of 40 feet, including allowing such additional signs on buildings that are less than 70 feet. Allowances for signs that are located below the second story that may be above 40 feet to be placed without having to use a sign above a height of 40 feet. Allowance for certain freestanding signs that are placed on landscape planters, retaining and/or screening walls for properties governed by site plans or form-based code use permits approved by the county board. An increased number and allowance of commercial messages on signs for public, civic, and institutional buildings. Excuse me. And finally, sort of broader regulations for temporary construction, sale, and leasing activities to account for construction impacting building access and removal of the use permit requirement. So in consideration of these proposed amendments, a brief history of amendments to Arlington's sign regulations since 2012 provides important context. In July of 2012, the sign regulations in the Arlington County zoning ordinance were reorganized, reformatted, and amended. The amendments, which originated with the County Board Chairman's Small Business Initiative, included improved comprehension of the ordinance, enhanced ease for administration and compliance, the incorporation of best practices and Arlington-specific practices, and the reduction of the frequency for which sign approvals required County Board attention. At that time, 30 to 40% of all sign applications required approval by the County Board through a special exception. Reducing the time and costs while increasing the predictability of obtaining tenant signs was and remains a tenet of Arlington's sign regulations. In addition to these comprehensive amendments to Arlington's sign regulations, there have been several other amendments over the years since then and listed on the right hand of this slide. Additional context explaining more about why staff is proposing these amendments is found within the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative, the CMRI. The proposed zoning ordinance amendment is part of the CMRI, initiated by the county manager and authorized by the county board in 2022. The CMRI purpose and intent is to modernize Arlington's regulations, practices, and processes to ensure a more nimble response to economic shifts, including Arlington's office vacancy. The initiative seeks to enable market-based solutions to address commercial building supply, with particular emphasis on repositioning and converting obsolete inventory. Strategic areas of study include office conversion, repositioning, redevelopment, and appropriate to this amendment this evening, tenant support and placemaking. At the conception of CMRI, staff identified strategic amendments to the sign regulations as part of a multi-year work plan. In April of 24, staff prepared a broadly worded request to advertise, which stated that amendments to the sign ordinance would be a critical economic tool and inherent to the goals of CMRI. Since the May 20th, 2025 ZOCO meeting, staff has continued to refine the proposed amendment. We've removed the proposed changes pertaining to architectural illumination as updated site plan condition language and the current language in the zoning ordinance align. We've refined the language within the additional sign area above a height of 40 feet, including clarifying the number of additional signs permitted, defining multiple towers, and clarified where the linear foot of a building frontage is measured. Certain buildings, which are devoted primarily to office, commercial, public, or at least 50% to hotel uses, are allowed up to 2 signs above a height of 40 feet. Additional sign area is allocated for these signs and does not count against the building's aggregate sign area. Having such signs and the increased flexibility associated with the proposed changes enhance economic development opportunities for the county and help to keep Arlington competitive in attracting tenants. These proposed changes, particularly in the sign area calculation, may result in larger signs for buildings that have sculpted or tapered towers, such as shown on this slide. Such buildings are more prevalent in Roslyn and Crystal City. In addition to reorganizing and moving all relevant regulations to this section for clarity, the following policy changes have been proposed, allowing for on buildings that are less than 70 feet in height, including signs for buildings in PS districts, calculation of sign area based on width of the base of the building rather than the width of the building at the height of the sign, removing sign ban and placement restrictions, so the only remaining limitation on size is calculation of the sign area. The current regulation for the sign band limits the height dimension of signs to 6 feet for the majority of the sign, with an allowance for part of the sign to be up to 9 feet, and limits the placement of the sign to the area within 20 feet of the main roof line. Removing the sign band expands the flexibility for the shape of the sign to accommodate creative branding within the allowed sign area, and expands flexibility for placement on the buildings, allowing the sign to be placed anywhere on the building above a height of 40 feet rather than just near the roof line. Also, what we're looking at is allowing buildings with multiple towers to have up to 2 signs on each tower, up to two towers. And as I had mentioned with the clarification of how the linear foot of the building frontage is measured, the length of the linear foot of the building frontage shall be measured where the base of the tower on which the sign is placed meets the base of the building. In this particular example, rather than extending from here all the way through to where it connects with the other building along this podium connection, the measurement would be where this tower meets that base podium. Second, or another issue is the signs below 40 feet. Providing business greater flexibility in sign type and placement is important to maintaining Arlington's economic resiliency, and therefore we are proposing allowing arcade signs on all C and M district buildings rather than just our strip shopping centers. An arcade sign is a sign that is hung below an awning or a canopy, and the signs would continue to have a clearance requirement of 10 feet below the sign. We would also be looking at providing greater flexibility for the placement of blade and wall signs. This would allow a sign above the front door of a building that may be hovering around 40 feet without having to use the sign above 40 feet allowance. Freestanding signs are prohibited for most uses in Arlington's commercial mixed-use areas as they can add to visual clutter and could, if improperly placed, obstruct pedestrian or vehicular traffic. Further, in Arlington's denser commercial areas with buildings at the back of the sidewalk, there's limited space to accommodate a freestanding sign. However, there are instances in which the design of the building requires retaining, screening, or structural walls. By definition, a sign on this type of wall is a freestanding sign, and therefore we are proposing to allow signs on approved landscape planters, retaining, screening, or structural walls for site plans or form-based code buildings that have been approved by the county board. We are also going to be allowing commercial signs and increasing the number of signs from 2 to 3 for signs located in public, civic, and institutional buildings. This change would allow, for example, signs for private schools or daycares that share space with religious institutions that may be located in low-density residential districts where commercial signs are generally not allowed. With the amount of new construction, redevelopment, and remodeling of buildings within the county, Section 1316 provides for signs for construction projects, new buildings, and empty spaces in existing projects. To account for impacts of off-site construction and to allow properties to place signs quickly, the following changes are proposed: to expand to accommodate street construction impacting building access and to remove the permit requirement. A comprehensive sign plan includes all signs for a project and allows for greater flexibility in calculating and allocating the aggregate sign area for a project. Once approved, this comprehensive sign plan becomes the governing document for signs on a project. We're proposing organizational edits to combine all of the comprehensive sign plan information into one section and provide additional clarity as to required plan elements. And these changes are intended to facilitate the use of the comprehensive sign plan provision. There is no intent of revising the entirety of Arlington's sign regulations. To achieve the proposed focused approach and alignment with CMRI, 12 of the 19 sections of Article 13 signs are not proposed to change. We are proposing a phased approach to the sign regulation amendments. To expeditiously consider and progress the above referenced amendments, certain changes also aligned with the CMRI but requiring additional modeling, research, review, and analysis are not included. And a second phase in amending sign regulations could include an additional focus on signs within the public realm, and also a study of urban placemaking tools and elements consistent with the AED strategic plan to facilitate economic development. The above studies, reviews, and analyses would inform subsequent amendments if desired and recommended for consideration by the county board. This slide shows the schedule for this work. On May 10th, there was an adoption of a resolution to initiate amendments. On June 14th, the county board authorized advertisement of strategic amendments to the sign regulations for no earlier than the July 7th Planning Commission meeting, which we were here this evening, and then the July 19th county board meetings. And we've had engagement opportunities throughout. The proposed amendments to the selected sign regulations, primarily for Arlington's commercial districts, coupled with commensurate consideration of impacts and benefits to the broader public and the county's economic well-being, closely align with CMRI's goals and objectives. The proposed amendments were developed with input from staff's work with tenants, including both small and large businesses, feedback received from business-related stakeholders, staff's continued application of the regulations, and the desire to improve clarity and best practices. Therefore, we are recommending that the county board adopt the proposed amendments to the sign regulations to generally increase the size, number, and placement locations for signs placed above a height of 40 feet, increasing the sign type, size, and expand the placement regulations for signs included and excluded from aggregate sign area in C, M, and P districts, allow for certain freestanding signs for properties governed under site plan and form-based code use permit, increasing the number and allowing commercial messages on signs for public, civic, and institutional buildings, allowing for broader regulations for temporary construction, sale, leasing activities to account for construction impacting building access and removing that permit requirement, and providing editorial changes for clarity. That concludes my presentation and available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any public speakers?
No public speakers.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any other commissions that would like to speak to us tonight?
Not on this topic.
Pardon?
Not on this topic. Not on this topic.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No.
Okay, and Commissioner Lantelmi, can I go to you to give a summary of the ZOCO meeting on this?
Sure. Standing in for Commissioner Striner, who chaired that meeting. It was well received. We had a number of more clarifying questions and questions on how specifically some of the changes work. So it was really fairly technically oriented. We made a couple of suggestions, which I'll, when we're having discussion, I'll maybe go into some of those during that period. But other than that, the ZOCO was very complimentary and very supportive of this whole initiative and these changes in particular.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. So then we can open this up to discussion.
Excuse me, Madam Clerk, I apologize. John Musso is here to speak. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. Mr. Musso, please come to the, and you get 2 minutes, is that right? 3.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I'm John Musso, Government Affairs Manager at the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. I will be brief. The Arlington Chamber supports the adoption of these strategic amendments to Section 13 of the zoning ordinance regarding signage. We believe that this is the combination of very fruitful work from staff in order to reimagine and simplify the zoning ordinance. We do request a series of strategic enhancements to this ordinance, both within the text of it, but also in terms of additional recommendations to the county for implementation. We do applaud the county for proposing this whole range of different zoning amendments regarding commercial signage, signage on landscape planters, flexibility for temporary construction signage, all very strategic but meaningful additions to the zoning code. The Chamber does encourage the Planning Commission to consider 2 very strategic additional revisions for further flexibility. Specifically, we had mentioned in a letter to the commissioners of addressing section 13.7.1.f of the zoning ordinance to provide a little bit more flexibility for businesses who are near an RA district regarding signage in the rear or side wall of their building. A very small change, but would have strategic impact for certain businesses who are along key commercial corridors to boost their visibility. We also recommend looking at section 13.7.1.3.5, which pertains to the direction of commercial signage above 40 feet. We believe it would be a nice complement to the existing proposals that are included in this ordinance, which go a long way in terms of simplifying commercial signage in that range. Additionally, we do ask that the Planning Commission consider recommending to the board, as we move to the second phase of sign revisions, of having a broader scope to encourage a slightly more expansive conversation on reimagining the sign ordinance for the Arlington of today. Things as signage in the public realm and sidewalk signage are very crucial elements in benefiting businesses, but also lend themselves to broader conversations of what we want the sign ordinance to be. And additionally, we urge the Commission and ultimately the board to support staff in their ongoing work in terms of providing clear and more direct information in terms of the signage process. The sign ordinance is not really just the zoning ordinance, it's also the process behind applications. And we were very enthusiastic about some of the proposals that are coming down the pipeline with staff, and we asked you to please support them. So again, thank you very much for your time, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so then we will open up to discussion between the commissioners. Let's start with clarifying questions. Does anyone have clarifying questions about the sign ordinance? Commissioner Bagley.
Just a clarifying question out of curiosity. Have these continually evolving standards on signage been as a result of requests from the business community, or or your attempt to maybe draw a greater amount of business community here? I'm just curious about that. Thank you.
And just to confirm, when you say the ongoing, since the ZOCO meeting, or just these amendments as presented tonight? So I think it's a combination of both. We've been hearing from our business community of working through the process, but also in hearing from some of our colleagues over at economic development, what they've been hearing from site selectors, for example.
Commissioner Berkey, did you have a clarifying question?
I do actually. Did you, so one of our Chamber of Commerce's recommendations was regarding the revision. They recommend revising section 13.7.1 F regarding businesses near RR or RA districts, basically regarding signs to be on the side or rear wall of a building if the main entrance is not located in that place, as I understand it. Is that something that you considered in this current scope?
You know, it was raised to us when we looked at the specific example. Although it's in a commercial district, it is a townhouse, which is sort of a unique product that we have and is sort of isolated in the sign ordinance. So while I would say we heard what was being said, but didn't do a thorough analysis of all of that, recognizing we are trying to balance a variety of stakeholders when we're bringing this forward. And fortunately, the chamber is able to have sort of a singular stakeholder, and we're looking at all of our stakeholders.
Okay.
Including our residents.
Sure. Is that something that we would consider looking at, at least considering in the future, as far as just looking at?
I think we could review it, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Weir. Oh, Commissioner Montelli.
I have a couple clarifying questions. For the landscape planters, retaining, screening, or structural walls, does that include those walls that are, for example, around the Clarendon Whole Foods or the Giant in Virginia Square that are roughly waist height? You know, they vary, but would those be considered one of these that you could put signage on? They're brick, you know, they're structures. They're not just chain fences or anything.
Yeah, I'm familiar with both of those locations, and they would be eligible.
Okay,
they
good.
would have to meet other provisions of the sign ordinance. So if they, setbacks, but yes, if they're shown on a site plan or a
I think
landscape
they
plan
are.
approved by the county board.
Okay, great. Thank you. I wanted to know that. Second, for the construction fencing, this came up at ZOCO. Is there any remaining content limits to what would go on that construction fencing?
The content limits haven't changed. So yes.
What would the limit be?
For construction fencing, I believe it's up to 120 square feet per.
No, I'm not talking about square feet. I'm talking about content, what it says on the sign.
Right. So the only limitation is up to 120 square feet per side of letters and numerals and logos. So any other or whatever that's not related has no limitation.
As I read, it could say, we have moved 2 blocks down. for the, what used to be there. They could put a sign up saying, Joe's Shoe Shop is now at Columbia Pike and Wakefield Street.
That's a little bit more, so, okay, sorry. So there's construction fencing for like a vacant site, which is what I was referring to earlier.
Talking about like
When you're talking about for a vacant,
a building that's being renovated or is being converted.
so the zoning ordinance still does
or
have a
being
limit.
torn down.
Being torn down. Yeah,
Because
the
you-
zoning ordinance still does have a limitation on not allowing off-premise advertising. So
That's what-
that is a very sort of hard and fast rule in the ordinance that you can't really dance on both sides of that line.
Okay, that's one thing I would recommend for the next round, looking at that, because that would help with those existing businesses, because we have them on Columbia Pike where they're moving because their building is being torn down. And there's the fence that always has to go around those.
Sure.
I really recommend that we have something that allows those businesses to say where they're moving to.
And I will certainly add that there's nothing that would preclude them from having that information on the site while they're still leasing that space.
Right, but this is once everybody's cleared out
Got it.
and they're going to tear the building down and there's that fence around it to protect the public from the building coming down. So if you understand what I mean.
I do.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So I strongly recommend that be raised, and that's why it comes to my final thing. I very much would want, you intend to continue this process and further flexibility and simplification of the sign ordinance. These are the type of things that still need to be addressed, and definitely continue this is a great exercise. Let's continue doing it. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Weir.
Maybe this is just for my curiosity, but going back in time even further than 2012, and I was just scrolling through the 2012 staff report, and forgive me if it's there and I missed it, but did I hear you correctly say that prior to, I'm thinking about the Roslyn Twin Towers, and if memory serves, there was, as far back as 2003, right, a USA Today sign on the top of that building. Under what authority, and that's one of the only buildings that I can remember having so prominent a sign so long ago. Under what authority was that sign placed? And I think I heard you refer to site plan, but if you could tease that out a little bit.
Prior to 2012, the county or this zoning ordinance had a provision prohibiting any sign located above a height of 35 feet. But the sign ordinance also at the time actually didn't allow any signs other than wall signs or blade signs up to 6 square feet. But it didn't have any provisions limiting the county board's ability to modify the regulations in the ordinance. So anytime anybody wanted anything that wasn't listed in the ordinance, they could do a site plan amendment or a use permit to request it, and the county board would consider that. And so any sign located above a height of, at that time, 35 feet prior to 2012 was approved by the county board.
So if we're flexible with timelines a little bit, in 2003, Nestle could have gotten a sign on its current buildings. We're being flexible with timelines and when things are built, right? So but it could have gotten a similar sign on top of a tall building the same way that USA Today got that sign, which
That's
is
correct.
through the site plan process.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It was public art.
Was it public?
No. Okay, Commissioner Guevara.
I think it's great that you guys are trying to increase our potential commercial properties and people renting us. My question is, what considerations have you given to sign illumination as it relates to migratory birds and how they can be disoriented? They can actually cause bright lights, especially during migration periods, spring and fall, draw birds away from their natural flight patterns. The lights can disorient them, making them circle endlessly and lead to exhaustion, also window collisions, reduced revival rate. Some counties participate in lights out programs and they issue specific guidance saying what sort of what measures can be taken to reduce sign illumination pollution. What considerations have been taken, and will the county be issuing similar guidance?
So I will say for this particular amendment, we didn't, except for a sort of a blip, we opted not to look at illumination standards. We have not touched those at all. However, fortunately, we have the author of the 2012 sign ordinance sitting right next to me. And I think at that time, there was a lot of consideration with respect to illumination. If you want to share.
Thank you, Jill. In 2012, when we rewrote the ordinance, we actually hired a lighting consultant to help us develop the illumination standards that are in the ordinance today. I will say bird migration patterns were not part of what we were studying. It was really more about just more sort of generally about light. And our illumination standards, though, were designed to limit light pollution to the extent possible. So for certain signs, like the signs located above a height of 40 feet, they're required to be, and I'd have to check the ordinance for the exact hours, but there are hours of illumination. And I can't remember if it's 10 p.m. or midnight. They have to be turned off. The lighting has to be turned off at that point. And then the illumination standards were designed to limit illumination to the extent possible. But there wasn't a lot of discussion about bird migration.
Given that some other counties are doing that, I think I would be interested in you guys considering that as a future study or some sort of consideration, particularly since so much has changed since 2012 and how we're sort of thinking about wildlife and the impacts that some of our actions can cause. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may ask a follow-up question to Commissioner Guevara's point, which I think is great. Do any of our sign ordinances require like dark skies lighting where similar to our street lights, the bulbs have to be pointing down and they have to be kind of sheltered, or do we have like under lighting that's pointing straight up into the sky?
We do have some regulations like that. And again, I'd have to pull them up to look specifically, but there is like for signs that are indirectly lit, they need to be pointing downwards so that they're not shining on neighbors, et cetera. In addition, the architectural illumination standards also have similar.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Bagley.
I want to align myself with Commissioner Guevara. But just as a comment, and I've made this comment before, as somebody who has managed an Arlington business and looking to move the business, unfortunately, we had to eliminate space consideration in a number of locations because they couldn't answer for us a clear path of what the signage would look like. And for our brand, visibility was critical. So we just had to walk. And I can't imagine we're the only ones. So I just throw that out there, and to thank staff and everybody who is, we don't want to get to a point of sign pollution where we look up and there's just too much. But for some, they really do need the visibility. And, if it's not available, they're just not going to lease the space. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to motions. Commissioner Bagley, could you do our motion for us?
I move that the Planning Commission recommend the County Board adopt the attached ordinance as shown in Attachment 1 to amend, reenact, and recodify the ACCO Section 13 signs to increase size, number, and placement locations and remove limitations on building height regulations for signs placed above a height of 40 feet in C, M, and P districts, increase sign type, size, and expand placement regulations for signs included and excluded from aggregate sign area in C, M, and P districts, and for public, civic, and institutional uses in all zoning districts, including allowance for freestanding signs increase number and allow commercial messages on signs for public, civic, and institutional buildings, allow the county manager to authorize placement of signs on properties owned by the county board, remove permit requirement, and allow temporary signs during street construction for temporary signs regulated under Section 13.16, signs for construction and sale leasing, incorporate additional and amended comprehensive sign plan requirements, and editorial changes for clarity.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Berkey. Okay, do we have any commissioners joining us virtually, Madam Clerk?
I'm sorry.
Do we have any commissioners joining us virtually tonight?
No.
No, okay.
Mhm.
So then I will go down the roll with our in-person commissioners. Commissioner Lantelmi,
Aye.
Commissioner Weir.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel is not here. Commissioner Steinberger is not here. Commissioner Bagley.
Aye.
Commissioner Guevara. Commissioner Berkey.
Aye.
Commissioner Striner is not here. Commissioner Robertson.
Aye.
And I will also say aye, so that motion passes unanimously. Do we have any additional motions? Okay, thank you very much, staff, Ms. Hunger and Ms. Albert, for being here tonight and presenting us this presentation, and for your work in general on the commercial market resiliency initiative. Can we go to our next item, Madam Clerk?
If you don't mind, Madam Chair, we could give them a few minutes to set up for our next item. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Our second item is FBC-39 and N-FBC-25, ordinance to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County zoning ordinance, Appendix A, Columbia Pike Commercial Form-Based Code, and Appendix B, Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. We have Olivia Sontag and Matt Matuzak for the last time to present to us this item for Barcroft Apartments. Thank you.
And am I correct that we're hearing presentations on the first two items together? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, allow me to reintroduce myself, Matt Matuzak with the Planning Division. We're joined tonight with Robert Gibson from DES, Jeremy Smith from DPR, and Melissa Danowski, who's here from Housing. As Commissioner just mentioned, we do have three pretty detailed form-based code items in front of you. To help navigate them a little bit more easily, we wanted to kind of split them into two groups, joining the first two items together in both staff and applicant presentations, and following the discussion in separate motions, proceed to the third item when we can have a similar conversation and motions for that one. So with that, I will leave you in the capable hands of Olivia Sontag from the Planning Division.
Hi, good evening. All right. So once again, these are the first two items that we'll cover. The first item is an ordinance to amend the Appendix A and Appendix B of the zoning ordinance to implement a new phase development use permit application and update the admin regulations found in each of those codes to help address the changes in the form-based code submission requirements and review processes. So this first item for consideration basically enables the phase development use permit tool. The second item itself is the Barcroft Apartments phase development use permit application for consideration. And it helps to establish and monitor all of the commitments across the Barcroft Apartments property that were identified in the Master Financing Development Plan, again, located at 1100 South Thomas Street. I'm not going to read all the addresses and RPCs here, but it's about 15 total RPCs contained within this phase development use permit. So I know a number of you have already seen some of these elements in several different capacities at zoning committee meetings and the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group. So again, the proposed form-based code amendments they went to the zoning or the form-based code advisory working group back in April, to the zoning committee of the Planning Commission in May, and then the request to advertise for that was completed in June. And then we are again tracking for these items to go to the county board in July. And then for the second item, the phase development use permit application, that item was reviewed by the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group in June, and it, again, is tracking concurrently with these 3 total items. The third item here is the neighborhood's form-based code use permit, which we'll cover in the second item. All right, so as always, we'll start with a little bit of background. This image on the slide shows all of the areas that are going to be subject to this phase development use permit application outlined in the orange boundaries. So you have Columbia Pike to the north, South 4 Mile Run, and South George Mason Drive. It's about 60 acres, 52 garden apartment buildings, and about 1,335 existing units. We also wanted to highlight some of the use permit applications that have been considered and are under review so far. So we do have 6 of the 7 renovation use permits which have been approved by the county board. And then we also have 1 new construction 100% affordable proposal that was approved by the county board in February. And then again, the application that you guys will be considering tonight. Within these 8 applications, we just wanted to highlight that they are going to deliver a total of 1,004 committed affordable units, about 34 accessible units, the first of 3 public parks on the site. They're achieving the tree canopy targets that are identified in the Master Financing Development Plan, as well as multiple segments of the biophilic pedestrian network and some of the streetscape improvements that are adjacent to these sites. So some exciting progress, but we do still have some other commitments to track. So the Barcroft Apartments Master Financing Development Plan, which the county board approved back in July of 2024, identifies a number of different commitments for affordable housing, the site development, and phasing. Some of these commitments, such as the revised conservation areas, the multimodal network, and locations of public parks and natural areas, were memorialized in amendments that were approved by the county board in February of 2025 to the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. But we do have some other commitments in the MFDP, such as site-wide tree canopy, which are not codified in the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code, and we will need to incrementally track those using a phased development tool. So that brings us to the first item, which are the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code amendments to enable the phased development use permit. So in addition to tracking the 5, some of the elements and the PDUP that we've addressed previously, including affordable housing, accessible units, tree canopy, and biophilic pedestrian network. It's also going to enable flexibility in the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code to meet the affordability requirements off-site, but within the phased development use permit boundaries. It is also providing some flexibility to adjust the delivery of the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code streetscape improvements if those improvements are identified to be delivered with a different phase. And then concurrent with this work, we're also working on updating the administrative regulations to incorporate some of these more kind of technical process-related updates. So in order to allow the application, the phased development use permit application, these are the amendments that are necessary to the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. And more specifically, these are the 3 sections that are proposed to be updated with the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. Again, it includes that administration section where we're introducing a modification that's allowed to to allow the flexibility to provide affordable housing or some of the streetscape improvements off-site on different portions of the property, allowing, again, flexibility for those street space standards and then the affordable housing requirements. So moving on to the second item, item B, this is the phase development use permit application. I'll just cover kind of at a high level what this application entails and then leave it to the applicant to present the details of their proposal. But with the updates to the administrative regulations, we did update the submission requirements. So the applicant did file an application consistent with these new requirements, including all of the everything outlined in the drawing set. So this new tool, again, is going to help monitor and implement aspects of the Master Financing Development Plan, which were not codified in the Neighborhoods Form-Based Code back in February of 2025. And then it's also going to focus on how both new construction areas and renovation areas are going to be able to share and collectively deliver on these 5 elements on the screen while still being required to meet the existing Neighborhoods Form-Based Code requirements. So we anticipate about 20 different use permits between both the renovation and the new construction areas, about 7 renovation use permits and 13 new construction use permits across the site, which is why it's important that we have a tracking mechanism to show how all of these elements on the screen are being incrementally delivered across the site. It's also going to include a phasing plan. This phasing plan doesn't focus on sequencing or timing, but just helps to identify which site improvements are associated with different development site pads on the property. So these are the 3 components that you'll see in the PDUP. The first are a set of conditions that are associated. This is similar again to phase development site plan permits that you may have considered in the past. So it's going to include condition language that is specific to all 5 of those elements that we're tracking across the site. And then it's also going to require that any previously approved use permits on the Barcroft Apartments property be amended if the phase development use permit impacts the approvals that those applications have received. And then with each future use permit approval by the county board, we will plan to go back and administratively update this phase development use permit application, specifically the tables included in the application to reflect all of the elements that were approved by the county board. So the second piece are a set of accompanying plan sheets that include both maps and tables. So the maps are provided for both the phasing plan and again, each of those elements that we're tracking, as well as all of the design guidelines for the biophilic pathways. And then the tables, again, will help to document and kind of balance the supply and demand throughout all of the incremental development of the site. So with each, for example, renovation use permit, we're tracking the number of CAFs and even the unit mix that are being provided with each of those county board approvals. And then as new market rate development, for example, comes in, we'll document how many committed affordable units they are utilizing as part of the supply that's been built up with all of the renovations and any 100% affordable new construction projects. So with that, staff is recommending to adopt the attached ordinance to amend both Appendix A and B of the Form-Based Code to implement this new phase development use permit tool. And we're also recommending that the Planning Commission approve the subject phase development use permit application. And with that, I'll pass it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Pardon me just one moment while I get these slides up and running. All right. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Lauren Riley with Walsh Colucci. We represent the applicant Gyre Lynch Real Estate Partners with regard to this phase development use permit application. I'm joined tonight by Kathy Puskar with Walsh Colucci and Greg Ward with Gyre Lynch, as well as our design team behind us as well, folks from VICA, Parker Rodriguez, and KGD Architecture. So with Ms. Sontag's thorough overview of the background of how we got here, I'll go over the key elements, framework elements of this phase development use permit, which is really the culmination of all of this hard work over the past year to implement the vision in the Master Finance and Development Plan. So it includes, as we'll go through today, concept plan and phasing, the commitment to affordable and accessible units, parking plan, biophilic elements, that biophilic pathway that was committed to in the MFDP, as well as the tree canopy goals for the site. Not loading. All right. Bear with me. Let's see if I can get this to update. I can share it in a different. Let me try sharing it in a different format. I think it's just loading.
The suspense is killing them, I can tell.
I know you can't wait.
Can
Let
you
me try.
just tap and just keep
Try this.
just gonna need to talk through it.
I'll send this to the clerk, Ms. Sontag, real quick, and then
Yeah,
y'all-
you can
y'all
send
don't
it to
mind
me. I
bringing
can
it
share
up.
my screen.
Yeah, maybe she can pull it up and we
Okay.
can just keep going.
Okay, it should be on your way. I'll try one more time.
Just go ahead. Go ahead and talk.
Okay.
Just go ahead. Let's go. Just stop.
All right. We'll move through. I had a contextual image for you, an aerial image, just to reorient everyone. As we're wont to do, we typically flip the orientation on you to provide a little bit more sense of mass and scale of the site to see things at a better level. So then after that, we'll get into the PDUP concept plan. So as Ms. Sontag spoke to, as part of the PDUP, we've divided the site up into different land bays, which include both the renovation areas as well as the new construction areas and the park spaces and the infrastructure that's associated with all of those. So when the map comes up, you'll see we've labeled all the renovation areas as renovation phases 1 through 7. You've seen 6 of those use permits already. You'll see another one in the fall. So those areas are relatively straightforward. And then the other new construction land bays are shaded in gray. And they're focused on the east node portion of the site as well as the west node portion of the site. Some land bays, like the 4110 application you'll hear in just a moment, contain only one phase of development. So that's what we affectionately call the Pinsky site, is Land Bay A. That includes one building and one park space that will be constructed in one phase. There are other areas of the site where we have, we're envisioning potential multiple phases of development, and that infrastructure will be phased accordingly. So if we could go to, this is the image I was mentioning, where in gray you have the land bays. For the new construction areas, the park spaces are in green, park space 1, 2, and 3, and then the renovation phases there are in white. And if we go to the next slide, we have, this is an example of the phasing plan, how this works across the site. So as I mentioned, on the top left of your screen, you'll see the example of Land Bay A, Penske, where we have one park space and one building. That's all going to be delivered in one phase, which is that red hatched area. And generally, all new construction phases will deliver infrastructure improvements adjacent to their site. Where we have land bays with multiple buildings, multiple phases of development like BCD, where one portion of the site may begin first, we've kind of broken that down into, if you can see in the bottom left of your screen, the red hatched area would show you what happens if, building C there at the corner of 12th Road South and South George Mason Drive is constructed first. It would build all of its frontage along George Mason, 12th Road South, and South Taylor Street, and it would also construct a portion of those 12th Road improvements in the Renovation 6 area. And then following that, south of 12th Road South, in the blue hatching, building D would build the remainder of the infrastructure along its frontage, including that restriped parking along South Taylor Street. On the bottom right, you'll see what happens if building D, south of 12th Street, what if that goes first? That building will construct improvements across 12th Road South. It'll construct the improvements on 12th Road within Renovation 6, and then the other two buildings will construct their remaining frontage. So we've worked hard with staff through these phasing plans to ensure that all of the public infrastructure improvements that were promised with the MFDP will come with the new construction. Next slide. And then we can get into these framework elements of the PDUP, which include affordable housing, accessibility, parking, the biophilic pathways, and tree canopy. Here you can see our plan for the affordable and accessible units. It's relatively straightforward. The affordable units echoes the commitment from Jair Lynch's original acquisition of the Barcroft property, which is to provide 1,335 units as committed affordable units. These are included in the renovation areas as well as the new construction LIHTC areas, which are shown in that pink salmon color on the map to the left, which would be land bays E, J, in one of the phases within the GHI at that corner there on the bottom left. In terms of accessibility, again, memorializing the commitments in the Master Finance and Development Plan, which is to provide 2% of units in the renovation areas as type A accessible units where achievable. In some areas, that's we're not able to bring some of those units up to the type A standard. And so we will be providing additional type A units in the new construction buildings to get to that 2%. And then generally in all the new construction LIHTC buildings, 10% of those units will be type A units. We go to the next slide. In terms of parking for a new construction, that'll be relatively straightforward. All new construction buildings must comply with the neighborhood's form-based code parking standards. For the renovation areas, as consistent with the direction of the Master Finance and Development Plan, we'll be maintaining existing levels of parking. There are two areas, two different areas that contribute to the parking supply for the existing buildings to remain in Barcroft. One of those is those private parking areas in that pink color that are internal to the site in those renovation areas. And then that second that second area that contributes to parking is the public on-street Barcroft parking shown in that light blue. So those will be public spaces inside the overall Barcroft PDUP along South Wakefield Street, South Thomas Street, 12th Road South, and 16th Street South. And then all of these spaces taken together will approach parking ratio of about 1 space per existing renovated unit to remain. Let me go on to the next slide. Here, starting to visualize the biophilic pathway commitment. We've broken this down into 3 different types of segments within the Barcroft area. The first type is in magenta. These are areas where we are stitching together and utilizing existing pathways in the renovation phases to connect them to this larger pedestrian network in Barcroft. The second area in blue is will be delivered with 12th Road South. These areas will comply with the streetscape standards in the form-based code, which deliver those biophilic pathway elements. And then the third type is the South Thomas Street biophilic pathway improvements, where we are again taking existing streetscape and enhancing that with the 4 elements of the biophilic pathways, which include enhanced ground level planting, decorative bollards and marker lighting, seating and benches, and wayfinding or interpretive signage. If we go to the next slide, you can see our precedent images for all 4 of these elements. Each of those biophilic pathway segments will have some combination of these elements. As you can see, there'll be a focus on native plantings and ground cover to enhance those existing pathways, this bollards and marker lighting to create a sense of place and assist with wayfinding, and then benches to provide opportunities for respite across Barcroft. And then we go to the last slide on the tree canopy goals. Again, memorializing our commitment in the MFDP to provide a certain percentage of tree canopy coverage across the different types of areas in Barcroft. So within new construction, committing to provide 20% of the site tree canopy. Public mini parks is 40%. The renovation areas is 50%. And then inside those renovation areas is where the preserved natural areas are. And you'll see we've committed to a goal there of 80% with the exception of C, that area in orange, which is where the slope failure had occurred a couple of years ago. And so we'll be making up for that area that was lost in the new preserved natural areas that we've added through the form-based code and master finance and development plan. And then as Ms. Sontag noted, we'll be tracking each of these elements through the upcoming use permits that you'll see, as well as going back through the old use permits and updating them or amending them to comply with this PDUP. There'll be methods to track these commitments each time we come before you, submit a new application, and then as that building or renovation is constructed, we'll have to submit an administrative change, updating the charts in the MFDP, showing how we're meeting that commitment. If we need to borrow on tree canopy from another site, for example, we'll have to show where that square footage is coming from. So we're meeting these goals at each stage of development. So that concludes our presentation, and we're available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers on these 2 agenda items?
Yes, we do. Let me get to this name. This is a virtual speaker. If you can hear me, this is for Roxanne Zier.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. You'll be allowed to speak for 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much. I live off of Columbia Pike in the Arlington Heights neighborhood, and I've been impacted significantly by a lot of the major construction projects that have taken place and also the road construction along Columbia Pike. But I have serious concerns about any of the proposed form-based code modifications or, as she was talking about at the end, making concessions by borrowing, using that term, borrowing from another site, tree canopy or something. Columbia Pike has lost a significant proportion of tree canopy, and the walkability factor has been impacted. And I'm just concerned about the design proposal of pathways within the Barcroft development, but not along Columbia Pike and along George Mason for the public to appreciate, especially across from Doctors Run Park, which is a beautiful natural area. those sites need to be preserved and beautified as well. So, it's not helpful to have large buildings that go straight to the edge of the sidewalks and have beautiful walkways for the people that live within those developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any additional public speakers?
No.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any commissions speaking to us tonight?
Mr.
About these two
Benson?
items?
Need to press the button.
Yes.
And you can raise the podium if you want.
Jack, please do.
Yeah, that's okay.
We are better able to hear you because the mic picks up better if it's closer. So it would help if you would raise it. There's an up and down button.
Thank
On
you,
the top.
Melissa. Thank you. Mhm.
Thank you.
So good evening. I'm Bob Benson. I'm here representing the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. I've provided written comments to the clerk for the record. The Forestry and Natural Resources Commission has provided comments throughout the planning process for Barcroft. We have emphasized the need for conservation and enhancement of the tree canopy at this site, and we feel that is significant and consistent with the goals of the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan, which is part of the comprehensive plan. We support the overall project. We applaud the efforts of the developer to be responsive to extensive tree canopy and biophilic opportunities that exist on this site. A year ago, in June of 2024, we provided a letter to the county board with 12 different specific recommendations on what could be done to improve the green aspects of this site. And it included the line, quote, "Arlington has a rare opportunity to make the new Barcroft community a magnificent natural jewel, a mini arboretum in suburbia." We support the phase development use permit and the related monitoring and implementation system. We applaud many elements of the plan, most notably the percentage tree canopy targets and the proposed set of biophilic pedestrian pathways. However, because the PDUP does not provide specific design recommendations for a long-term development, we are a bit concerned that we don't know how the comments that we've raised in the past will be fully addressed. The devil's in the details, and we don't know how those details will be addressed. We realize that further consultation is not required under the PDUP, but we suggest that the major size and scope of Barcroft should encourage informal consultation with interested commissions like mine, perhaps simply by sharing landscaping plans as different phases are developed. For example, the phase development of the 12th Road corridor. That would give us an opportunity to provide informal written feedback. We also are concerned in the provision in the PDUP where it allows trade-off where there's excess canopy for areas where there's not enough canopy. We fully recognize that such trade-offs are allowable under established county policy, but we believe that the goal of this entire site is to have significant tree canopy and green space. Again, it's a jewel, it's an opportunity. So we encourage exceedance of the tree canopy targets wherever we can, all throughout the community. And we discourage any type of trade-off. We encourage the developer to look for opportunities to revise the design to address that. Madam Chair, I have comments on the use permit. Will I have an opportunity to come back and address those at that time?
Yes, after we resolve these first two agenda items, we will be also having a whole new presentation and public comment period for the last item.
Thank you. Those are my comments on the first two parts. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any additional commissions, Madam Clerk? No. Then do we have a committee chair report?
Sure. So I chaired the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group meeting on this item. I will be quite succinct. Spoilers, it was very well received. It has been very well received. I think a lot of this wasn't a surprise to the group. We've been talking about this for several years now, especially coming through last year with the enhanced advisory group, and then the master development and financing plan. So generally supportive. Folks appreciated the enhanced public spaces, which we talked about at length. I will continue to bring up a plug for more lighting on the site where feasible, and the paths. I'm going to keep plugging that. And then also some folks had brought up concerns about just communication about parking. But again, generally very well received and no major issues raised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we can open it up to discussion. Commissioner Berkey, do you have some agenda items, or should we start with clarifying questions and then?
So I recommend we can do clarifying questions. If folks have a list of things they'd like to go through, that's fine. My sense is maybe we do clarifying questions and then just kind of see how it goes, because again, we've been talking about this plan for 18 to 24 months.
Okay, thank you. Clarifying questions. All right. I do have one. So I love the higher tree canopy requirements. I think that's fantastic. I think Mr. Benson's ideas about this being a jewel or a little arboretum in Arlington are lovely. I was wondering about, what the legal authority is for us to be able to say we are going to have higher tree canopy requirements for this site.
So these aren't necessarily requirements, and that's partly why they're not codified in the neighborhoods form-based code. These are tree canopy targets that were established in the in the MFDP. And so these are just being implemented. These are agreements that the applicant made upon studying some of the county-wide tree canopy targets specific to some of these different areas. So for example, recommending the 25% for the type of development that's anticipated on these new development sites versus the type of development that's proposed in or existing in the renovation areas. So that's why those tree canopy targets are correlated to each of those different development or areas within the property that way.
Okay, and I know that if we are talking about affordable housing and a new project doesn't have the on-site, but there's elsewhere on the property, we're allowed to count that, but it has to already exist. Would that be similarly true with the tree canopy targets, that you can't say, oh, in 2 years we plan on providing more tree canopy, so that can count over there for what we're doing right now? Or no, it only counts for something that already exists that they're allowed to leverage for a new project on the overall site?
Yes, you're correct. You can only borrow from something if it's available. So the kind of good news is the applicant has been progressing all of these renovation use permits, and already with the review of some of those landscape plans, we are seeing them provide a surplus of tree canopy in those areas, which is great because we're seeing about 60% or more in some cases. So other areas can then borrow from that supply that's being built up.
Okay, great. So we're getting all these extra benefits kind of front loaded, and then we'll see a lot of the development. Okay,
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Any other clarifying questions? Okay, well then, agenda items. Does anybody have comments? Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, I do not see the moving around of the tree coverage from one spot to another, borrowing, or however you want to claim it. I don't see that as being a trade-off at all. I see that as finding a way to meet our goals, both for tree coverage and for affordable housing. These are not incompatible. We have our goals for a reason. And while it's nice to exceed the goals are real, and we're being able to meet them on this site. So, as I said, I don't see this as a trade-off. I see this as a win-win. Thank you.
Commissioner Berkey.
Yeah, I would align myself with Commissioner Lantelmi's comments. I think I think the reality in this site is a lot of concessions have been made. Concessions is not the right word. A lot of thoughtful effort has been made already for our tree canopy. And I think walking the site, if you have the opportunity, will show that to you as you consider the tightness and the width of our streets, what we're trying to fit in from a walkability perspective. We've talked a lot about bike lanes and multimodal. We've talked about parking cars. Obviously, we're preserving a lot of existing buildings on that site. And in that process, a lot of choices have had to be made, and sometimes those choices have involved, preservation of trees, right? And that means that we can't do other things, or we have to work around, preservation, for those buildings. And that's not a bad thing, right? But I think we really do need to acknowledge that that really is already baked in, that we should really be proud of what we're doing already. Would we like to have more trees? Absolutely. But this is already an example of a model project. It will be a gem in my view. And if we push and push and push and push to get everything we ever wanted, that's what sometimes risks these projects ultimately. And so I think we're in a really good place. I think we have a lot of confidence that the applicant will pursue more tree preservation or planting opportunities if they arise. This is a 10 to 15, maybe 20-year project we're thinking about here. So there's only so much we can know right now. And I'm also confident that we're going to have a lot of engagement opportunities as we go along, as they continue their construction and renovation. Thank you.
Any additional comments about this new tool that we have and this PDUP? Okay, then can we have some motions? Commissioner Berkey?
As soon as I pull them up. One moment here.
I have them here if that's easier.
Yeah, sure. Right. Okay. So we're going to do two motions here, right? Okay. So the first motion is, let's see here. Okay. I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the County Board adopt the attached ordinance attachment 1 to amend, reenact, and recodify the Arlington County zoning ordinance, Appendix A, which is the Columbia Pike Commercial Form-Based Code, and Appendix B, the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code, as shown attachments 2 and 3, to implement a new phase development use permit application and update the administration regulations found in each code to address changes in the form-based code, submission requirements, and review processes.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Ware. Okay, do we have any discussion, or would you like to speak to your motion?
Only to say, again, this is the culmination of many years' work of many folks on our county staff, county board, members of our community, our commissions, our form-based code advisory working group, planning commission. I think this is something we're going to have another motion, but I think this is something that we should really be proud of going forward. I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for engagement because construction takes a long time, and we're going to go piece by piece. And I am confident that as we iterate in that process, we'll have a good partner with Jair Lynch here to make revisions as needed, because that's certainly going to be the case. So I'm very happy to support this motion.
Thank you. And to Mr. Benson's question earlier about opportunities to review landscaping plans, this is not an SPRC, but it will be a form-based code auxiliary working group. So there will be some opportunities to review things, and you can get in touch with Ms. Sontag on how to best get involved. Okay, then we will go to a vote. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Weir.
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley.
Aye.
Commissioner Guevara.
Aye.
Commissioner Berkey.
Aye.
Commissioner Robertson.
Aye.
And I also say aye, so that passes unanimously. Commissioner Berkey, do you have another motion?
I do. I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the County Board approve the subject phased development use permit to establish a monitoring and implementation system to help realize the long-term vision for Barcroft Apartments as established in the Master Financing and Development Plan, subject to the conditions of the staff report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Robertson, seconds. Okay, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think I said what I needed to say.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Lantelmi,
Aye.
Commissioner Weir,
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley,
Aye.
Commissioner Guevara,
Aye.
Commissioner Berkey,
Aye.
Commissioner Robertson,
Aye.
and I will also say aye. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your presentations for the first two items. And I think, Madam Clerk, we are ready for you to call the fourth agenda item of the night.
Number 4 is FBCN 25-00001. The use permit for the development of a 7-story mixed-use building with 264 units and ground retail on the Barcroft Apartments property in accordance with the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code. We have, again, Ms. Olivia Sontag and Matt Matuzik with Melissa Danowski to present this item.
Hi, good evening again. So this is the second new construction neighborhoods form-based code use permit on the Barcroft Apartments property. It's located at 4110 Columbia Pike. So again, they're proposing the development of a 7-story mixed-use building with 264 units and ground floor retail on the Barcroft Apartments property in accordance with the neighborhoods form-based code, with modifications for the height of the first floor relative to the fronting sidewalk elevation, the spacing of entry doors, landscape standards, building footprint, the phase development use permit, affordable housing assignment, and approval of 1 bonus story. So again, this application relies upon the first 2 items that you just reviewed for putting in place the phase development use permit tool, and then effectuating the Barcroft Apartments phase development use permit application, which enables this neighborhoods form-based use permit to borrow existing established affordable housing within the Barcroft Apartments PDUP boundaries. So this site this item was reviewed by the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group back in May. And with very, very little discussion or questions about this application, good support from the advisory working group overall. And again, this item will track to go to the board with these 2 other items in July. So to get us started here, you can see the site outlined in red on this is an excerpt of the general land use plan map. The GLUP designation is service commercial, and it's within the neighborhood's area boundaries noted as note 24 on the GLUP map. It's also within the C2 zoning district and is within the neighborhood's form-based code boundaries. So within the neighborhoods form-based code, this is on the central sub-area regulating plan. It's Columbia Pike frontage and George Mason frontage is the urban mixed use building envelope standard. And then the future 12th Road South portion, which is on the southern side of the site outlined in red, is the urban residential frontage. And then this site also includes the designation of the first of 3 mini parks on the property, which the proposal does intend to deliver. And then it also shows this purple hatching, this magenta hatching, which allows for up to 2 bonus stories on the site. So we also have some of the neighborhoods form-based code required cross sections. These cross sections were updated with amendments to the neighborhoods form-based code back in February of 2025. So for this site on the Columbia Pike frontage, they're delivering a 4-foot building zone, a 10-foot clear sidewalk, and a shared parking and street tree zone, and maintaining the existing travel lanes. On South George Mason Drive, they're delivering again a 4-foot building zone, a 12-foot shared use sidewalk and trail as part of the George Mason Drive study. And then a designated tree zone and designated on-street parking, again, maintaining generally the existing travel lanes for George Mason. And then on the 12th Road South portion, this is a segment of the of the street network that's being dedicated as part of this neighborhoods form-based code use permit. And on this segment, which is on the southern portion, the southern side of the property, again, a 4-foot building zone, a 6-foot sidewalk. In this case, it's just a street tree zone across this entire frontage, and the travel lanes. So I'll give just a high-level overview and leave the details to the applicant. But overall, this proposal will demolish the existing commercial buildings. There's existing 7-Eleven building and the former Penske truck rental on the site. There's also some existing surface parking on that property. And they're proposing to construct a 7-story mixed-use building. So again, they're proposing the base allowance is 6 stories for the site, and they're proposing 1 bonus story as they're allowed with that designation on the regulating plan for the provision of some additional affordable housing, which I'll highlight in a second. And then on the ground floor, they're proposing some ground floor retail, about 6,000 square feet, closer to the corner of Columbia Pike and South George Mason Drive. Total of 264 units. 85 CAFs are required as part of this proposal, but based on both the base affordable housing requirements under the neighborhoods form-based code, as well as the additional affordable housing units that are required with the bonus story that's being requested. So all those 85 CAFs, again, will be provided within existing garden apartment buildings within the Barcroft Apartments property. They're also proposing 304 vehicle parking spaces, 120 bicycle parking spaces, both consistent with the neighborhoods form-based code, as well as an 8,900 square foot different segments of private open space for the site. Again, the site also delivers a 12,000 square foot mini park. I'll leave those details to the applicant, but this did undergo a community engagement, an online community engagement process to gain feedback from the community on this site. And the applicant has implemented some additional changes to the mini park in response to that feedback. They will be pursuing Earthcraft Gold, and they, in addition to that, they have some energy optimization requirements they're meeting, as well as all of the additional prerequisites that are outlined in the neighborhoods form-based code, including EV charging stations and EV-ready spaces. And then here are the requested modifications. I think the applicant's presentation will give a little better visual on some of these requests that are being made. These are also outlined visually in the board report. But they are requesting modification for the height of the first floor relative to the fronting sidewalk elevation and the door spacing on South George Mason Drive. This is due to some topography change that occurs in that area and the proximity of the adjacent mini park in that location, as well as some existing utilities that run along the frontage of the building. So for that reason, they're unable to provide doors to access some of those units in those cases, or stairways that would be provided due to the topography. The second item are the landscape standards for street tree spacing just on 12th Road South. Because of the loading access that's required and the garage access that's required off of that frontage, they are short by 1 street tree on that frontage. But they are providing an excess of street trees along the both the Columbia Pike and the South George Mason Drive frontage. And then they're also requesting a modification for the vegetation height in the public space within the mini park to help screen some existing utilities that are within that space. So staff is supportive of both of those requests. They're also requesting a building footprint over 25,000 square feet. They do have a firewall separation between kind of bisecting the property from South George Mason Drive to the adjacent property line, and have proposed some transition lines along that frontage there to show just different massing along that frontage. And then again, the 1 bonus story for the provision of the affordable housing is being requested, and the phase development use permit affordable housing assignment for those units to be off-site. So as part of these neighborhoods form-based code use permits that are going to continue to come forward as part of the overall development of the Barcroft Apartments property, we are documenting how they are meeting the phase development use permit requirements. For this particular site, we really have 3 different kind of buckets of requirements in the phase development use permit that we're tracking. For the phasing plan, we're tracking the delivery of the adjacent mini park, which they're proposing, the dedication of 12th Road South, and then the adjacent frontage improvements along Columbia Pike, South Church Mason Drive, and 12th Road South. So those are all being delivered as envisioned in the PDUP with this proposal. Again, they're also delivering the 85 CAFs for the development provided off-site. We have documented in the PDUP that we currently have 979 CAFs that have been approved by the county board and are available to borrow. And then for the tree canopy targets, again, we're looking at 2 different calculations for the site. One 40% target for about 4,900 square feet of tree canopy. And then the development area target is 25%. The mini park, especially due to some feedback from the community that wanted to see additional shade and tree canopy in that space, does exceed the minimum target, and the development area can borrow some of that additional canopy provided, and they're providing a total of 15,000 square feet of canopy for the entire site. So they are short of the total requirement by about 8,500 square feet of canopy, which they'll need to borrow from existing surplus canopy on other portions of the site. We currently have about 9,500 square feet available under the phase development use permit, but even as we kind of progress through this week, we're continuing to review and approve existing landscape plans that will further boost that supply of tree canopy that's available for sites to borrow from. So I'll just quickly go over to the review process. The application was first submitted back in February. The item went to the Form-Based Code Advisory Working Group in May. The applicant held a community meeting on May 19th, and I'll let them speak to that process. The mini park engagement process was open for 2 weeks from June 9th to the 24th, and we did have quite a bit of feedback, again, mostly focused on providing additional canopy and shade where possible, screening the utilities on the corner. There was some interest in providing some additional play space for children, but I think we, as we reflected in the board report, this space was not identified as maybe an appropriate space for that, and there are future mini parks and other portions of the property that will be considered for those kinds of items. And we also do have an upcoming updates to Doctors Run, the adjacent Doctors Run Park, that may also contemplate some of those improvements. And we're on track to take this item to the county board in July. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll share my screen again for you.
Thank you, Ms. Sontag. And to the applicant.
Thank you again, Lauren Riley with Walsh Colucci, and I won't even try to share my screen this time. Learn my lesson. Well, thank you, Ms. Sontag, for giving a thorough overview of our application, the community engagement process that we've had over the past couple months, and I'll give you guys an overview of our over the application, the mini park, and specific design elements of the building. We're happy here to present the first market rate construction project within Barcroft, and to be at this milestone where now the PDUP is approved, and that can facilitate future new construction that was envisioned in the MFDP. So we're now able to take advantage of those tools that have been created to realize development, not only new construction LIHTC, but also new construction market rate buildings to bring more housing to the Columbia Pike corridor. So if we can go to the next slide. And then the next one goes to the aerial image here. Yeah. Here's an aerial image overview of the site outlined in red. We're here, sitting at the corner of a prominent intersection of Columbia Pike and South George Mason Drive. To the south of us is Doctors Run Park. To the north, you have the Exxon gas station, the Liberty gas station, and that one-story commercial building. Caddy corner across the street from us is the Centro development when they have their own park there as well. And then to the west of us is the remainder of the Barcroft PDP area. There will be new development that is envisioned directly across the street from us on South George Mason Drive. If we go to the next slide, you'll see where we sit in the regulating plan. We are, of course, in the neighborhoods form-based code. We have this orange urban mixed use frontage along Columbia Pike and South George Mason Drive, and then the blue urban residential frontage there, 12th Road South. We also have the mini park there at the corner at that intersection, which is envisioned to be about 0.3 acres. And then the rest of the site, as you can see, is rather narrow and constrained in geometry as well as in topography, as you'll see as we go through our plans. And here we have set required building lines for where our building must front along the streets in the park, as well as where our parking and building functions can go. We can go to the next slide. Here's some existing photos of the site. As you know, the county just completed some of its multimodal improvements in front of this portion of the site. So you can see those new wider sidewalks in front of our building. On the left is image 1 as you're looking east, and then on to the right as you're looking west toward that intersection. Also with those improvements came construction of some above grade mechanical equipment at the corner that I think we can see in the next slide as well. If it'll, oh, sorry. Here is the sidewalk, the existing sidewalk along, on the right-hand image, you can start to see that mechanical equipment that was constructed at the corner of Columbia Pike and South George Mason. That's one of the site constraints that we're dealing with in terms of development in the mini park, and you'll see how our team has thoughtfully dealt with that in a moment. And then these images here show you the existing conditions of the site, the narrow sidewalks, larger curb cuts, and then surface parking on the site. And we'll be improving that with the proposed development. If we go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I had them. I had them backwards. We'll go to the rendered. Yeah, we could advance. Here's the rendered site plan for the proposed development. You can see in white is the footprint of the building. Smith Sontag noted to be a 7-story building. We're requesting 1 bonus story as permitted by the neighborhood's form-based code in exchange for providing additional affordable housing off-site. There'll be 264 units. Of those, 44 will be studios, 153 will be 1-bedroom units, 6 will be 2-bedroom units, and 7 will be 3-bedroom units. In terms of vehicular access to the site, there will be a retail loading entrance off of Columbia Pike there to the top left of your screen. And then residents and visitors of the retail can access to the garage on the right-hand side of the screen from 12th Road South. In terms of pedestrian circulation, we're providing a main lobby entry there right across from the mini park with a secondary entry on 12th Road South. And then plenty of retail entrances there at the corner of Columbia Pike and South George Mason. This project will have about 7,000 square feet of retail space right there at the corner, and we'll have a retail plaza in front of it as well to help activate that space and make it more usable should users such as restaurants want to occupy there. We'll also be upgrading the streetscape with new street trees, landscaping, and we'll be providing a new bus pad for the South George Mason Drive bus stop as well. In terms of open space for the residents, the form-based code requires between 15 to 20% of on-site open space for residents. We're meeting that requirement with these 3 courtyards above grade on the building, which is about 8,900 square feet. In terms of parking, we're meeting the form-based code requirements. And then Ms. Sontag went over a couple of the modifications to the form-based code that we're requesting here. All of those are dealing with site constraints such as topography and those landscape constraints that we have with the mechanical equipment and utilities at 12th Road South. And our team has been able to thoughtfully design a building and a mini park that addresses those constraints while still meeting the intent of the neighborhood's form-based code. If we go to the next slide, and then the next one, give you an overview of the mini park. Here you can see where our site sits relative to other open space, publicly accessible open space in the area. To the north of us, there's the Alcova Heights Park, and directly to the south, Doctors Run Park. Across the street from us, as I mentioned, we have Centro with its publicly accessible open space. And then in the future of Barcroft, we have 2 more public open spaces, mini parks that will be developed with new construction. And so you can see where our park sits there, bridging these existing parks and within the larger pedestrian and bicycle network. We go to the next slide. Here's the proposed design of the park. We've really taken cues from the Doctors Run stream to the south of us, as you'll see this meandering path with seating nooks there in the center of the park provides an area for passive recreation, areas for seating, and opportunities to kind of be in nature. This park has been designed to meet the neighborhood's form-based code standards, which are prescriptive. They have requirements for impervious area, vegetation, even the number of benches and trash receptacles you can have in your park. And this design meets and exceeds those standards. For example, 62% of the mini park is unpaved pervious area. 48% of the total park is vegetated. And there's just over 59% tree canopy cover in the park. Again, exceeding those goals we just established in the PDUP. As Ms. Sontag mentioned, this mini park went through an online engagement process. It also went to the advisory working group. We received overall vast majority of respondents in the online engagement supported the mini park and its design. The comments we did receive were regarding shading, wanting more shade, wanting more planting and more trees. And we were able to accommodate that by revising that center, or so the portion of the park to the north. We enlarged the shade structure, moved it closer to the retail plaza to better activate that area and provide more shade. We also increased the amount of plantings and trees surrounding that shade structure area on the site to address those comments. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see some precedent images of these features of the park, these rocky boulders, native tree canopy, seating in that wood texture to create a biophilic active park. Go to the next slide. I'll just quickly run through, and then here's some updated renders of the park, again, showing you the enhanced plantings there, as well as the additional shade we've been able to create. Next slide. Here's a render from inside the park. And then we'll walk through architectural design quickly. Here's the ground floor of the site. You can see we have the retail on the left, the lobby amenity space there in the center, and then units wrapping the garage for active uses along South George Mason Drive and 12th Road South. Next slide. Walking up the building, we have a double height amenity space on the second floor. Units and garage continue above and onto the third levels where our first above grade courtyard pops up. And then we'll go to the fifth level where you can see those 2 additional courtyards that sit above the garage. And I'll just move through if you.
Okay, yeah, how many slides do you have?
Just a few more.
Okay,
We'll
because
go
I'm
through-
just cognizant, it's
Yes.
8:46. One of our commissioners has to leave in 14 minutes.
We can
And-
skip through the elevations and just show you the renders from the last slide. And if you have any questions, we're happy to pop back through any of the elevations. Here's a render of the building where you can see the park, the Columbia Pike bus station existing to remain, and then the building to the left there. And then the next render is a close-up view there as you're standing kind of next to the park looking toward Columbia Pike. You can see how the building massing and materials are breaking down, giving you three distinct representations there for the retail, the lobby entrance, and then the units to your right. And so with that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have public speakers tonight?
No more speakers on this item except for Mr. Benson for the.
Okay,
Forestry
so
Commission.
Mr. Benson, would you like to speak on behalf of your commission?
Good evening again. I just want to start maybe by clarifying that members of my commission have walked Barcroft many, many times. with the urban forester, so we're very familiar with the trade-offs. And we do see tremendous opportunities to add to the tree stock and not affect other important goals like housing and bike lanes. As far as this development is concerned, we applaud the amount of new tree canopy plantings. We think this is a great design with their park, and we applaud the number of street tree plantings. We applaud the fact that there are going to be large native trees, shade trees, not just ornamental trees. We like that it's natural landscaping because there's so much recreational area in other parks nearby that it's really meant to be a little green oasis in front of the building. So we're very much in support of the overall plan. We would like to suggest that there be some consideration of 8-foot planting strips for the street trees, and perhaps consideration that there not be street parking along South George Mason or Columbia Pike. The unit does have 304 parking spaces, so there's going to be a lot of parking available already. And this is similar to a comment that we made on 4230 Columbia Pike back in February, where we feel like there are additional safety concerns for the bike lanes and for traffic on these busy thoroughfares. But most importantly, from the perspective of my commission, by giving street trees the biggest possible area to grow and thrive, we give them the greatest chance of survival. And we've all driven around Arlington and see so many street trees that just aren't making it. So we want to maximize the likelihood that street trees adjacent to this building will have a good chance of survival. And that contributes to having Columbia Pike and South George Mason be tree-lined boulevards, which is, of course, what the goal is of the Columbia Pike overall plan is. And it's very consistent with the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan goals as well. So appreciate your consideration of these additional comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Berkey, can you give us the committee chair report, please?
Yeah, again, I'll be brief. I had chaired the Farm-Based Code Advisory Working Group in May, where we discussed this. So as Ms. Sontag alluded to, there was a very wide consensus of support for this use permit. Some questions about public parking in the garage, which we talked about, what, type of retail is envisioned, which of course is hard to say, but an acknowledgement that right now there's a 7-Eleven that is oft frequented that will be going away as a result of this. So just an acknowledgement of kind of that reality, right? And a lot of interest in the mini park, which we've talked about at length already tonight, but what that ends up looking like. But again, other than that, no major issues flagged. The advisory working group is generally in support. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So for our discussion, why don't we talk about architecture, transportation, sustainability and biophilia, the public parklet, and any community benefits like affordable housing. So we'll start off with architecture, clarifying questions or comments. Okay, then transportation, Commissioner Lancelmi.
Yeah, I have two transportation related questions. One is for staff. I'm a bit confused about 12th Street and the width, because the rendering, some of the cross sections seemed with wide lanes and a 2-foot down the middle, yet the renderings from the applicant showed, at least from overhead, seemed a much narrower right of way. What is it? What is 12th Street? How wide is it going to be?
This is Robert Gibson with Arlington County DES. And the street curb to curb should be 26 feet to support aerial fire access for the segment that is shown in front of the property.
Okay, so how does that break down as to how wide are how wide is that center? How wide are the travel lanes?
It'll function mainly as 2 individual lanes. I mean, with no connecting streets or other network, it's in many ways will function as an alley would
but it is a public street and could connect through in the future with future Columbia Pike redevelopment.
Yeah, what I'm concerned about here, and this is something we raised about in other, or where we were looking at Barcroft and looking at 12th Street across George Mason, that it was really wide and it didn't seem a need for it to be that wide. For just 2 travel lanes and parking, it seemed way wider than it needed to be. And that rather than having all that pavement, couldn't we make the tree pits wider? The off to the side. It would still be within the right of way technically, but it would be green rather than asphalt. And I would like to see that happen on this side too, that we don't have so much paving for just 2 traffic lanes and 2 parking lanes. So that's just a comment. We don't need to get further. For the developer, I do have a question. This is a pretty high parking ratio. Is there a specific reason why you felt it needed to be that high?
The form-based code requires 1.125 spaces per unit and then 1 space per 1,000 square feet of retail space. And we are right at the required number.
That's the answer I needed. I just need to know why it's there.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Okay, additional comments or questions about transportation? Okay, then we'll go to sustainability and biophilia. Okay, public spaces / the park. Okay, and community benefits, affordable housing. Commissioner Guevara.
Hi, just want to make sure. So you're saying that there will be no affordable units with on-site on the building, and you're sort of borrowing from the larger property. Can you tell me a little bit about how you came to that decision?
Yes, as part of the MFDP process, part of the vision for the new construction buildings and the market rate buildings would be that they could utilize the commitment to provide 1,135 caps across Barcroft. The premise of the MFDP is that Gyre Lynch will make that 99-year incredible commitment to affordable housing in Barcroft and be able to use those units to satisfy affordable housing requirements in the market rate developments. And so we are doing just that with this project. So while there won't be any units on site on this 4110 project, there will be in the 3 new LIHTC construction buildings and in the renovation units to remain across Barcroft, getting you to the total 1,335.
But you could have also chosen to put some of those 1,300 within the market rate building.
The premise for the economics of the MFDP were that we would provide caps for the new construction units within the existing units to remain. That is the only way that these
like financially make it financially feasible.
That's right.
I understand. I suppose it's just more a philosophical kind of concept, and I know that 1,300 units, it's amazing, and that of course there's trade-offs, but I do feel like it sends this sort of notion of the haves and have-nots. I mean, there's like a pool there. There even like the little wedge of the park you're planning to do, it's kind of more exclusive to that community, I feel. And granted, I know the Barcroft property is larger, but I don't know. It just, to me, again, this is more philosophically. I know it's allowed. I know that it needs to make financial sense, but I just think the optics of it just don't sit well for me. That's all.
If I may, on to your point about the amenities, I did want to also flag that as part of the MFDP, Gyre Lynch will be providing a resident amenity center in one of the new LIHTC construction buildings for all residents, all existing residents in Barcroft. And then all those residents will also have access to the new parks that we're providing both close to them and at this new Penske site. So I did just want to.
Do they have access to the pool as well, or no?
Sorry.
Do they have access to the pool as well? No.
No, but they will have access to all of the recreational, like all of the outdoor recreational amenities that we've been building within the renovation areas. Like a couple months ago, you all reviewed renovation area 6, which will have a playground, as well as an active recreation field for existing residents of Barcroft. The new one of the new LIHTC construction buildings will have an amenity center that we've yet to design. We don't know what that will include quite yet. And then those buildings themselves will also have amenities for those residents, like fitness centers, business centers, things like that you would see in a typical residential building.
Okay, thank you.
Any final comments or questions? I just wanted to say thank you very much for providing 7 3-bedroom units, so families have the opportunities to live in high rises. I love to see that and encourage you in future projects to continue to do the larger size units as well. Okay, are we ready for motions?
Just one this time. I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the County Board approve the subject use permit in accordance with the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code, which is Article 11.2 of the Zoning Ordinance Appendix B, for the development of a 7-story mixed-use building with 264 units and ground floor retail on the Barcroft Apartments property, with modifications pursuant to the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Form-Based Code for the height of first floor relative to the fronting sidewalk elevation, spacing of entry doors, landscape standards, building footprint, and approval of 1 bonus story, subject to the conditions of the staff report.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Weir. Can we go right to a vote?
Let's do it.
Okay, Commissioner Lantelmi,
Aye.
Commissioner Weir,
Aye.
Commissioner Bagley,
Aye.
Commissioner Guevara,
Aye.
Commissioner Berkey,
Aye.
Commissioner Robertson.
Aye.
And I also say aye, so that passes unanimously. Okay,
Ms. Peterson,
yes.
may I take just a moment of privilege to just say goodbye to Matt? We have worked together on Columbia Pike. I think we figured it out. It's been 16 years. Is that what we said? I think 17, 18, I don't know. Matt and I have worked for a very, very long time on Columbia Pike projects, and he has always been fair, honest, forthright, looking out for the best interests of the community and of Arlington County, while also understanding the need to work together collaboratively to get to yes. And so I just wanted to say thank you to Matt, and we'll miss him once he leaves.
Well, thank you. You are getting us started on what now we wanted to turn and say, well, first, thank you to our applicant. Thank you to our staff. Thank you to our public speakers. And thank you to Mr. Matusik for all of the work that you have done for this specific project, but then also for all of the projects that you've worked on for the county. You have been a wonderful person to work with for all of us. And we trust what recommendations you give to us. We know that anything that comes to us has been well researched, well thought through. And so I know I wanted to say thank you. I met one of your future planning commissioners from Falls Church a couple of weeks ago, and they are so excited to have you. We are very sad to leave you, but we are glad that you have a new planning commission that will take good care of you. And I also wanted to turn it over to Commissioner Bagley, who wanted to say a couple words to you.
No, I'm glad that you brought it up because I was like, we should say something. So I think most of us up here have worked with Matt in some capacity or another over the years, and regardless of what it was, we always knew that we had the solid base that we needed for the knowledge to help guide us if we didn't know something. So again, on behalf of this body, we are really going to miss you, but we're so proud that, you can take the knowledge and all the expertise that you've had from Arlington, and Falls Church is going to be very lucky to have you. So thank you.
And I'd like to recognize Commissioner Weir.
I've said this to Matt privately, but I'll say it again to make sure it's on the record, which is that, Matt, your impact on this county and community is real. It will be lasting, and has and will have made Arlington an immeasurably better place. Thank you for everything you've done. It has been a joy and a privilege to work with you.
And I'll chime in too. Thank you for the work you did on the Pentagon City Plan with me. It was a privilege, and it was a great result. You just worked so well with that community that had real concerns. And I think we ended up with a really good result, taking into account all of the huge number of viewpoints that were raised during that whole process. And I think you navigated that really well, which shows you're moving into the right type of job. You can do this. And from one fellow New Yorker to another, best of luck.
Great. And of course, you're always welcome to come back. And, yes, we're here on Wednesday and Thursday too. So we'd love to see your smiling face again. Okay, so we'll move on to commission business.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Approval of the meeting minutes. I didn't have time to review them personally. So if we can move that, Madam Clerk, to Wednesday, is that okay?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, great. Staff updates, Mr. Pfeiffer.
I'm going to borrow Mr. Matuzik's microphone to say that we have no staff update.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Steinberger is not here for an LRPC report. Commissioner Bagley, SPRC.
We have a tentative SPRC meeting on the 24th, and so just be watching for that. I sent out a list of projects that are also some interesting ones that are in the pipeline. So take a look at that list that I circulated earlier earlier this evening, and you'll be hearing more about that. Thank you.
Commissioner Bagley, I understand there's even more that have recently been filed in the past few days. So I think some of those are not on your list yet. So we'll be looking forward to seeing those.
Yes, we keep catching up with one another on all of this.
Almost every time I log in for the morning, a new project is filed.
Which is a good thing.
Real-time update.
Our CMRI is working. Yay. Okay. And the 24th is River House? Walgreens. Okay. And we have a
And
River
we have
House.
River
as
House on the
well.
28th.
28th. Okay. Okay, great. Commissioner Striner is not here for a ZOCO update. Form-based code, Og? Would you like to?
Bye.
Well, you're going to be here at either the Wednesday or Thursday meeting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll save remarks then. Suffice to say, you've heard everything about the activity of the form-based code advisory working group for the last few months. No meeting till September.
I'll just say that how grateful I am, Eric, that you stepped into chair at both of the last two meetings, since I would have been in deep trouble domestically otherwise.
Okay, Commissioner Bagley, PFRC. Okay, we do have another couple items to do tonight. Yeah, the policy, which I actually had a question about, if I can find it. By Commissioner Berkey. So I was wondering, this is the exact same thing we approved last year, is that right? And this is the template that every commission has to do. Okay. I just was wondering, on number 7, no more than 2 members of the Planning Commission are together in any one remote location unless that is open. Shouldn't it say talking about business? Because 3 of us could have a virtual party where we're making cocktails, and that would be allowed, but we can't talk about business. That's the point. Wine tasting?
That's correct. We would have to take this back to the public engagement group and find out if that is potentially what is meant. But as of tonight, we are not in a position to, to revise or rewrite, but just to adopt what has already been written.
Okay.
Unless you would like to request doing this on Wednesday when you do the meeting minutes. If you'd like for us to maybe go back and ask questions, if you guys need more time to review this.
Okay, well, I did have one other question really quickly, which is number 4, Mr. Pfeiffer, which seems to say that if we can't do virtual, then the meeting has to be in recess. But our SPRC policies say that if we don't have an in-person quorum, we can still have the meeting, but we have to turn off virtual. But then that would imply that we're like going into recess. And so I didn't know if that conflicts with our SPRC policy.
I would have to look at the bylaws for SPRC. I'm not sure that specific scenario is mentioned in the bylaws. You are correct that I think technically you could still have the meeting as long as you turn off the, electronic means. My understanding though is the advice from the county attorney's office is that in that scenario, you just postpone the meeting.
Okay. Okay. So do you all want to approve this as is or wait until Wednesday? Approve it? Okay. Okay. So, colleagues. Yeah, well, we do because Eric was an extra person. He wasn't planning to be here. So we have 6, right? Yeah. So we have quorum. Okay. So colleagues, I ask for your unanimous consent to approve the annual electronic meeting policy adoption, or sorry, annual electronic meeting policy. Yep. Looks like it is so moved.
So adopted.
So adopted. Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you to staff for taking good care of us tonight. Tonight's hearing summary will be presented to the county board by Commissioner Berkey, and this meeting is now in recess.
Thank you.
Yes, see you on Wednesday and Thursday.